Hey guys, it's Maddie and welcome to Beauty in Crime. This is the first video I will be posting on my YouTube channel and I'm so excited to be here and give you some content. I will be doing a makeup look and talking to you about a true crime case. I want to start off by saying I mean no disrespect to anyone I mention in this story. This is just information that I gathered off the internet and put it into one video. I want to give a disclaimer before we get into this video. Viewer discretion is advised. This case is not for everyone. We will be talking about murder, suicide, death, and cannibalism. Yep, you got that right. We will be talking about cannibalism. We are going to get into the case and I'm going to start my look. We are going to talk about a very horrible case today that was tragic for many people and has affected them for the rest of their lives. This case is known as the Greyhound bus killing. This case will be traveling to Manitoba, Canada. I remember being a young girl and hearing about this case, and it was quite terrifying and shocked me, and it terrified me for years, so I'm sure some of you have heard about this case before. In today's case, we will be talking about the tragic death of Tim McLean, which occurs on July 30th, 2008, on a Greyhound bus traveling on the Trans-Canadian Highway, 30 kilometers west of Portage-la-Prairie, Manitoba. I just want to give a heads up before we get too far into this. I may be butchering some of the names, but hopefully I say them right, so please forgive me. Timothy Richard McLean, Jr., also known as Tim, was born on October 3rd, 1985, in Victoria, British Columbia, making him only 22 years old at the time of his death. Tim was known as an active athlete and beloved son, father, brother, and uncle. He was also known to be a very adventurous person. He loved to travel and meet new people, and that's exactly what he was doing with his life. It was said that he could always bring out the best in people with his charm, and he was loved by everyone who met him. Tim was very outgoing and had the urge for adventure, which led him to start working as a carnival barker. Now, I had to look up what this was because never even heard of that before. A carnival barker is someone that attracts people to come to the carnival. They talk to a bunch of people, get them to come in and over to the events, such as like a circus event or maybe the fun area, what they usually have, all the rides and stuff. So he enjoyed doing that so much. Tim began working for a carnival in the summer of 2007. This carnival traveled all over Canada, which was perfect for Tim because he got to travel and do something fun with people. Tim was excited to be able to travel and meet new people. As I said, he was very outgoing and he was just so great at his job. He had the best time. They would have parties, they'd go out drinking, they'd meet new people, and he was just having fun, enjoying his life. He loved this job so much, he continued to work at the carnival for a full year, traveling around Canada. After a year, Tim decided it was time to settle down. He wanted to move to British Columbia. He wanted to possibly buy a house, get a full-time job, and hopefully find someone he could start a family with. He was just ready for the adventure life to be over. At the end of July 2008, the carnival was about to move location somewhere else in Canada. So Tim thought this was the best time for him to kind of end it there and quit working at the carnival. And he decided that it was his time to move on. He finally made the decision that he would travel home to Winnipeg, where his family is and all his friends, and he would start there. He was looking at his options. He could either take a 2-hour plane ride home, or he could take a 24-hour bus ride, which to me, that is insane. I could not do that. I can't even be on a bus longer than 2 hours. I go crazy. So it seems like a long time. But for him, he wasn't making too much money while working at the carnival, and he didn't really care about spending money. So he decided that the bus ride would be perfect for him, and he made his choice to take the bus ride home. And sadly, if he had just spent the extra money and taken the plane ride home, Tim's life would have not ended that day. And it's very devastating to even think about that. Tim boarded the Greyhound bus 1170 through Saskatchewan. So at 12:01 a.m. on July 30th, 2008, Tim boarded the bus along with all the other passengers at that stop. And as he did, he got on the bus and sat in the rear of the bus, one row up from the washroom, and he began his 24-hour journey home to Winnipeg. This bus had several stops along the journey, but it was near the end of the ride that this bus ride would take a turn for the worst. The bus made a stop in Erickson, Manitoba at 6:55 p.m. After this time, he had been on the bus for nearly 17 hours. He was close to home. The new passengers boarded the bus, and at this point, the bus was pretty empty, so everybody had their own row to themselves, and nobody was really near each other. Tim was asleep with his headphones on, and at this point, he wasn't disturbed by anyone. And people usually fill up the front of the bus first, so he was at the back and no one was really around him. The bus continued its journey for a couple more hours, and it had a stop for the passengers to get off, grab something to eat. And Tim did that. He got off, got some food, and got back on. It was when Tim got back on the bus when some passengers from the Erickson stop decided to change their seats. And this is when a man who was sitting at the front of the bus grabbed his things and began to walk down the aisle on the bus. It was said by some witnesses as he walked down the aisle of the bus, he would look at each person as if he was like analyzing them, which would freak me out. He ended up sitting next to Tim at the rear of the bus, right beside him. This man was described as a tall Chinese man in his 40s with a shaved head, and he was wearing sunglasses. Tim did say hi to the man. He said, "How are you?" Even though this bus was half empty and he could have sat in many empty seats, he chose to sit next to Tim. But Tim didn't think much of it. He just went back to sleep with his head against the window and his headphones on. Tim didn't obviously think anything strange about this man, who, as a witness says, he was holding a toilet paper roll in one hand and he had a big bottle of iced tea in the other hand, and he would not want to let go of his toilet paper roll. He would kind of tuck it in and undo his iced tea and then take a drink and then do it back up and continue to hold this toilet paper roll, which is just kind of odd, especially when you're on a bus. I think anyone would think that's a little bit strange. The other passengers said they saw this man starting to behave even stranger as they saw him start rocking back and forth, and he was kind of muttering something, but they weren't sure what he was saying. He was saying the same thing over and over, but he was not speaking English, so they couldn't really understand what he was saying. But they definitely pointed this out as something strange that was going on. At around 8 p.m., it was dark outside, and the bus did not have its lights on in the inside so that people could go to sleep and get some rest on that long journey of a bus ride. But this passenger that was sitting beside Tim, he had his sunglasses on the entire time. Even though it was dark, he kept them on, which again was showing strange behavior. At 8:22 p.m., passengers were relaxing, watching their phones and computers when all of a sudden they saw the passenger that was sitting next to Tim take out a large hunting knife. And this is when the tragic event is going to take place. And I'm going to warn you right now that this is absolutely horrible and very tragic what happens next. The passenger on the bus that was sitting next to Tim took his cover off his hunting knife and he began to stab Tim McLean, who was sitting there sleeping, not even knowing what was coming. The other passengers on the bus were seeing this happen right in front of them, and they all began to panic. It was said that some passengers were crying, screaming, some were puking just by how graphic it was, and they were running to the front of the bus to try and get off and just let the bus driver know that something horrible was happening behind him. This bus was on the highway, and the bus driver was trying his best to pull it over, but he was unaware of what was going on, so he was taking a little bit more time and making sure it was safe. But once he saw the panic in the passenger's eyes, he made sure that bus got to the side of the highway as soon as he could. At this point, Tim had woken up to the brutal attack, to stab wounds in his chest and throat, and he just began to scream and tried his best to fight off the attacker, but he wasn't able to. He was being stabbed by the stranger who he really didn't even notice was there, and all he could do was scream. It was said that those screams are the most disturbing thing that anyone on that bus has ever heard, and it haunts them to this day. I can't even imagine what that would have been like for Tim, waking up to this stranger just attacking him. Tim had tried his best to get away, but the only way out was over top of his attacker. So in a Greyhound, you're sitting in a row of seats, and there's a row of seats really close in front of you, pretty much touching your knees. So the only way out was over top of the man that was attacking him. And he did this. And unfortunately, he did not make it very far. He landed in the aisle and laid there helpless while this man continued to stab him over and over again. The bus driver pulled over to the side of the highway, and this is when he and all the other passengers quickly got off the bus. And at this time, it is said that Tim would have been stabbed around 50 to 60 times, and he was still alive and still screaming. There were people climbing over seats to escape this horrible attack. There was a few people who were still behind Tim and his attacker, and they had to find a way to get off the bus, so they had to climb over the seats and just run as fast as they could. Everyone was on the side of the highway just looking onto the bus where this man was brutally attacking another human being. All they could do was just stand there and wait for help. Some people, again, were crying and screaming, and some were still throwing up. It was so horrible for them to watch. They were in fear and they were in shock what they just witnessed. I'm sure they were probably wondering if it was a really bad dream that they were stuck in or if it was real life. Nobody expects something like this to happen, especially when you're just trying to get somewhere on a bus. A lot of them might have been trying to get home, and nobody would have expected this kind of thing to happen right in front of you. The bus driver had engaged the emergency locks to prevent this man from getting away, and thank God he did, because he did just that. He tried to drive the bus away with Tim in there with him still, and he was very, very, very fortunately not able to, because the bus driver did that very smart before he could even try. And he did just that. He tried to drive it away. This is when another truck driver had noticed the bus was pulled over at the side of the road, and he saw people running off the bus and panicking, just freaking out. So he decided to pull over and see if he could help. The truck driver, the bus driver, and another man decided they were going to go onto the bus and risk their lives and try their best to save Tim. But unfortunately, they were chased off the bus by the man who was attacking Tim, and he slashed a knife at them, so they got off as fast as they could. They said to have stood at the front of the bus and watched this attacker stabbing Tim McLean to death. And at this point, they knew there was nothing they could do, that Tim was already gone. They said the attacker stopped stabbing Tim for a moment, looked up at them, And the look on his face was just filled with emptiness, and they were just shocked. He had no emotions, nothing. The attacker now went back to Tim, and he now started to behead him, which is, I can't even imagine that. And the men that tried to go on the bus decided to barricade the bus so there was no way out for the man to go and everyone would be safe on the side of the street. They were making the choice to protect the other passengers, and that was all they could do at this point until help came. The police have been called at this point, but they were in the middle of the highway, so it was taking them some time to get there. This is when the attacker finished severing Tim's head, and this is absolutely disturbing. He slowly walked up to the door where the men were standing, holding the door shut and trying to barricade him in, and he showed them Tim's head, held it up, and there was no expressions on his face. He didn't say a word. He just showed them the head and dropped it and stood there for a little bit. This is when he picked the head back up and went back to Tim's body and continued to mutilate it. What is crazy is that this man was marching up and down the aisle with Tim's head in his hand and was displaying it to everybody that was standing outside the bus, anybody that was driving by. It was like something he was proud of. Like, I don't understand how you could just put that on someone else, how you could give them that trauma and not even care. The police had arrived at this point, but they were waiting for a full SWAT team to arrive as the situation was far too dangerous and threatening for them to tackle alone. As they were waiting, the attacker was at Tim's body, and this is when we're going to talk about cannibalism. Just a pre-warning. He was at Tim's body and he was continuing to sever pieces of Tim off, and he began to eat pieces of his flesh. So this occurred for 4 hours. The police and the SWAT team were just waiting, watching this all go on, waiting for the right time to make a move. They did have a plan, and they figured the man must have been in some sort of psychotic state of mind, and he was mentally unstable. So they had to make their timing just right and their plan in a smart way. But this time they figured he would snap out of this mindset and he would calm down. They were worried that if they interfered too soon that he would try and kill one of their own or someone else that was outside. So they just waited. And after many hours of waiting and waiting, around 1:30 a.m. on July 31st, the attacker attempted to escape by breaking a back window of the bus. And this is when the RCMP arrested him soon after he tried to run away. He was shot twice with a taser, and he was handcuffed and put in the back of a cop car. This is when the forensic team entered the bus and they found parts of Tim McLean scattered everywhere. And something strange stuck out to them. They could not find Tim's ear, nose, and tongue. They were not in there. And it was later said that the police at the police department, when they were bringing the man in, they found them in his pockets. Like he was saving them for later. Disturbing. Tim's eyes and part of his heart were never found and are presumed to have been eaten by the man who attacked him. The news had gotten word of this story and it was everywhere. It was a horrible tragedy and everybody was talking about it. It was on every news station. But at this point, they didn't know who the man was that got brutally murdered on this bus. And that was because his body was so unrecognizable from the horrible attack that he just went through. Tim's mother, Carol, had been working at a senior home when she was on her way out the door. to work when she heard about this on the news. And she said she had a bad feeling in her stomach all day, but she figured that it wasn't her son, that he was either almost home or on his way home, and she didn't even think it could be him. So when Carol got to work, everybody in the nursing home all decided to pray for the family that this horrible tragedy happened to, and Carol didn't even know at this point that she was actually praying for herself and that it was her son that she had just lost. It's just horrible. When he was not home when they expected him to be, his father came home and all Tim's friends were standing on his front yard and saying to his dad, "Do you know what happened?" And this is when Tim's father and mother confirmed that it was their son on the bus that lost his life on the Greyhound, coming home to see them. Now, let's talk about the man who murdered Tim McLean. Now, this case has a lot of controversy, and you're about to find out why. His name was Vince Lee. He was born in Dandong, China, on April 30th, 1968, making him 41 years old at the time of the murder. Vince graduated from Wuhan Institute in Technology with a bachelor's degree in computing. He was said to be a very hardworking man who did not show any signs of anger or trouble. On June 11th, 2001, Vince immigrated to Canada and started his life here in a place he was very happy to be. He became a Canadian citizen in November of 2016, and he was working hard to support his wife and start their lives. It was later that year that things would take a turn for Vince, and he abruptly left his wife and moved to Edmonton from Winnipeg. He was working multiple jobs, I believe 3 different ones at the time. It was 4 weeks before this horrible tragedy took place that Vince would be fired from his job at Walmart following a disagreement with another employee. He was going back to Winnipeg when he took the Greyhound for an apparent job interview when things took a turn for the worst. At 12:05 on July 28th in Edmonton, Vince boarded the Greyhound bus that was bound for Winnipeg. Vince was said to have gotten off the bus that day at around 6 p.m. in Erickson, Manitoba, where he sat down at a bus bench that was next to a grocery store, and he slept there the entire night. I guess he was waiting for the next bus. But this is when he started to display some very strange behavior. According to a witness who saw Vince at around 3 a.m. that morning, Vince was sitting straight up with his eyes wide open, just staring into nothing. And this was definitely some strange behavior. On the morning of July 30th, still on that same bench, he sold his brand new laptop to a young boy for only $60. His strange behavior continued as he boarded the bus, where he would soon murder 22-year-old Tim McLean. A witness to the attack has said that Vince seemed to notice everyone around him as he took his hunting knife and stabbed Tim over and over again. It was like he didn't care who was there. He showed no rage or anything. He was like a robot, they said, and a robot that was just stabbing another man. Once Vince Lee was arrested, his trial commenced on March 3rd the following year, with Vince pleading not criminally responsible on account of mental disorder. So this means he accepts that the offense occurred, but he claimed that he was unable to form the necessary state of mind of a sane person in those moments. This is one thing that makes everybody very, very mad about this case. The psychiatrist that was working with Vince at the time, he said when he performed this act on Tim, he was hearing voices, and which he believed they were from God, telling him to destroy the demon sitting beside him, or he would be the next to be killed. The preceding judge, John Scurfield, accepted the diagnosis and decided that Vince Lee was not criminally responsible for the killing of Tim McLean, and he sentenced Vince to remain in the Selkirk mental health facility. Now, Vince was obviously responsible for this horrific murder. He did such horrible things and just mutilated Tim's body. And he even ate part of his body and flesh. Like, he ate parts of his heart. Oh, and his eyes. That is just so horrible. But Canadian law has surprisingly lax requirements for those with mental illness, which I guess helped in Vince's defense, but very tragic for Tim McLean and his family. He lost his life, and you can't get that back. Vince spent around 6 years in the mental facility and was found not a threat to himself or anyone else in 2016 and was fully released to live out the rest of his life. He changed his name, he got an apartment, and is living out the rest of his days after 6 years in a mental hospital. Tim's parents were shattered by their son's untimely, horrific death, and it seemed no one could be held responsible for what happened to their son. They are devastated to this day and do not agree with what the Canadian government did for the killer of their son. Here's a quote from Tim's mom, Carol. "Nothing changed for everybody else. The traffic still went. The sun still shone. And it was so maddening to me that the whole world didn't stop. Mine did. It stopped, and it took a long time to really want to get up every day." After this incident, there were many people left struggling to cope after the horrors they saw that day. For those who witnessed the attack on the Greyhound bus that night, had no peace. Some tried to drink the memories away, while others have had to go to therapy to get help. Others even moved to new locations to try and get away. Those who witnessed this event are destroyed from PTSD. The experience made them not be able to shake the loud scream they heard from that bus that night. The police who arrested Tim that night found Tim's ear, nose, and tongue in his pockets. It was such an intense scene they showed up to that day. I think it would be scary for anyone, and it would affect the rest of their lives. Tragically, the horror of that night that took place took a toll on everyone involved. The Mountie who first boarded the bus that night of Tim's death never recovered from his shock. He was burdened and overwhelmed by his PTSD that only 6 years later, he ended up taking his own life, which is so tragic. He just couldn't take it anymore. He was living in a daily torment of his own private hell, and his nightmares were absolutely horrible for what he saw, and sadly, he took his own life. In the end of the case, it seems this murder affected not only the family and friends of Tim McLean, but everyone who was involved that day. And that is the end of the Greyhound bus murder. I would love to know what you guys think about this case. Do you think Vince got the help he needed and was ready to return to society, or do you think he should be locked up away for the rest of his life? Please give your opinions down below in the comment section. If you wonder what I'm using in my makeup look today, I will link it down below. Thank you so much for joining me today for Beauty and Crime. Hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. I will be here every Friday with a new video and a new makeup look.